both implemented, you'd see, you know, depending on where you are in the channel, this is the Route 28 bridge going upstream. So depending on exactly where you are in the channel, you can see almost a 3-foot reduction at the bridge and carrying upstream. So that's a pretty substantial reduction in flooding. This is the depth grid mapping like I showed in Mount Tremper. We've changed the colors a little bit, but basically the blue represents deep water and the red represents shallow water. And I'll run through these fairly quickly. When we remove the bridge in a 10-year flood, if we replace that, when I say remove the bridge, what I mean is we pull it out of the model and it assumes we're replacing the bridge with a larger structure that does not impede flows. And in this case, it's an expensive option because not only are we replacing the bridge, but we're replacing the bermed roadway on both sides of the bridge that constrict the flows there. In a 10-year flood, it basically floodplain enhancement in the 10-year flood, you start to see some real reductions. 1.6 feet down here. Of the floodplain enhancement and the bridge removal, we see an even larger reduction. So the combination of those two scenarios leads to some pretty good results. And then we look at the 100-year flood, which is a much larger flood event coming through. Now we start to see some large reductions in flooding, close to 7 feet here at the bridge. And this is what the flood looks like, a 100-year flood through that area under existing conditions. And you see the colors lighten up there, indicating the change with the bridge being removed. And you see the reductions going upstream. I'll just toggle through those. You see the changes in color, but what you notice, regardless of the 3.5-foot reduction here at the bridge, this whole area is still being flooded. When we look at the floodplain enhancement scenario, again, you see large reductions in flooding, but you still have flooding through this whole area. And when we look at the combination of both, despite the fact that we have close to 7-foot reduction of flooding at the bridge here, you still have flooding through here. It's just less frequent and it's less deep. And you can see the reduction in flooding, having implemented those scenarios of enhancing the floodplain and replace the bridge with a larger structure. So I know it's a lot of numbers, so I'll try and just summarize it for you as we go through the benefit cost analysis. During the 10-year flood, we saw substantial benefit from the floodplain enhancement, but very little benefit from replacing the bridge. And during the big floods, the 100-year, we saw the best benefit from a combination of floodplain enhancement and replacing the bridge. And they extend quite a ways upstream from that bridge. And they reduce, but they don't eliminate flooding.
I have one question. I don't think you said it, but we have not seen a 100-year flood.
No? Nope, that's right.
I've seen 6 of them.
No, but they're not a 100-year flood of this,
Yeah.
these mathematical models. So
Right. We haven't. The Irene flood came close to it, around 80, I believe, but it was not a 100-year flood based on the statistics, based on the gauges going back over time.
So some of these home relocations are liable to happen due to Mother Nature, as opposed to some of these houses are going to be washed away. Whether we do anything here or not.
Yeah. That's likely if we were to get a flood of that magnitude. Yes. Now a couple of others, I'll go back to that when we do our benefit cost analysis, the dredging and the floodplain enhancement and the bridge. Just wanted to quickly run through a couple of scenarios on the Beaver Kill where we've seen some flooding. We looked at a floodplain bench, similar to what I described in the floodplain enhancement. A floodplain bench is just sort of a smaller version of that. We looked at it in this area. So here's the Beaver Kill coming up from the Esopus. And this red area is where we modeled a floodplain bench in an attempt to keep the water from crossing the road here and flooding. And we saw in the 10-year flood less than a foot of reduction over 300 foot of channel, and then a larger flood reduction in the larger flood. And this is what it looks like You see some small changes in the 10-year flood. And then in the 100-year flood, you see some reduction here, and you get the flooding off of Route 212, by constructing that. We also looked at the Plank Road Bridge, which, if you look at it, if you look at the flood profile, water sort of backs up behind the Plank Road Bridge. It's acting as a constriction and causes some flooding upstream. The bridge has been damaged previously in floods. And we look, and you do have a reduction in flooding. If that bridge were to be replaced with a larger structure, you'd have quite a reduction in flooding just upstream of the bridge and extending about over 400 feet upstream of the bridge. And here's what that looks like. It's not much of a difference in the 10-year flood, but in the 100-year flood, you can see the bulge here, where the water hits the bridge and backs up. And you can see it's reduced. Whoops, hit the wrong button. Here we go. And you can see the reduction in flooding as a result of putting in a larger bridge, but it still occurs. And I know I've run through a lot of numbers there, so thank you for bearing with me. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but if people have questions later, I could go back and show you some of those flood maps. So here's all the alternatives we looked at in the Mount Tremper study area. Some of them we've rolled out, like the levee enhancement, the flood chute. But others we looked at, we want to look at more closely in the benefit cost analysis. The dredge scenario, the enhancement of the floodplain, the Mount Pleasant Bridge removal, which is part of the floodplain enhancement project, the replacement of the Route 28 bridge, and then a combination of the two. And then both the scenarios on the Beaver Kill. Because all of them had some flood reduction merits. So the dredge scenario in Mount Tremper. Over the 50-year time period, if we do that dredge scenario that I described, we see $2.4 million worth of flood reduction benefits over time as a result of some homes not being flooded. Then we look at the cost. Because you recall, it was a huge amount of gravel being removed, and there's a cost associated with that, based on the numbers I laid out earlier. It's close to $2 million each time we do it. And by the time you repeat that 5 times, we're at close to $9 million. So although there is some benefit of deepening the channel, when we compare that to the cost, it's not a positive benefit to cost ratio. The floodplain enhancement scenario. Again, it's broken into the benefits of having relocated those structures out of the floodplain, and then also the benefits of the reduction in flooding at the homes that remain. And you can see that most of the reduction, most of the benefit is as a result of having relocated those homes out of harm's way. Close to $21 million worth of benefit from those homes not being repeatedly flooded. We also have, as I said, benefits associated with the reduction of flooding from the homes that remain on the opposite bank and the ones that remain on the Route 28 side. And totaling over $25 million in benefits over the 50-year period. Now we look at the cost estimate for doing that floodplain enhancement. We have the buyouts of the properties, which are over $8 million, demolition costs, removal of the Mount Pleasant Bridge, and the design and construction of the floodplain enhancement project. And we're at over $15 million. And we look at the benefit cost ratio, and it's 1.63. And I'll summarize these again later at the end. If we look at replacing the Route 28 bridge, this is removing that undersized structure, replacing it with a larger bridge, larger embankments, and removing that big constriction and flows there. You see about 1.2 million in water surface reduction benefits. These are homes that aren't getting flooded as a result of that reduction in water surface elevations. But when you compare that to the estimated cost of replacing that bridge and widening it to the degree that it would need to be to span that whole floodplain, we're at about $15 million. So we have a pretty dismal benefit to cost ratio because of the cost of the bridge replacement. When you look at the combination of the floodplain enhancement and the replacement of that bridge, now you have almost $22 million in benefits from the homes being relocated. You also have benefits from water surface reductions, and you're at about $26 million. And now when you compare that to the costs, including the bridge replacement, you're still less than 1, but at least it's a little closer to 1. 0.87. When we look at the replacement of the Plank Road Bridge on the Beaver Kill, you see about $141,000 in benefits of replacing that bridge. And the cost of replacing it is about $1.75 million. That's assuming a truss-style bridge similar to what's there before, except a wider and higher possibly, and a low benefit-to-cost ratio. The flood reduction benefits alone do not warrant the cost of replacing that bridge. And we looked at that floodplain bench scenario on the Beaver Kill, same sort of result. There are some flood reduction benefits, but compared to the cost of constructing that thing, you have a negative benefit-cost ratio. So I know I went through that fairly quickly. This is a summary of the different benefit-cost ratios for those alternatives in Mount Tremper. The ones that are positive is the floodplain scenario. That's a result mostly of those flood reduction benefits of the homes being relocated, but also of the flood reduction benefits, and as Rob pointed out, in Phoenicia that does not include reductions in flood insurance. So this is a summary of our recommendations in Mount Tremper. Seek community consensus on implementation of the floodplain enhancement scenario, which would include the property relocations. Investigate the possibility of the Route 28 bridge replacement. It's a very expensive alternative. And as we said in Phoenicia, floodproofing of commercial buildings, elevation of structures, and pursue relocations where landowners are willing. And that's a summary of the reports. I've handed the reports to the board members for their review. We've had some back and forth with the Safari group, and they've provided their comments, and we'll have a final version of the report out shortly. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, the gravel that you take out.
Yeah.
Can't you, Eric, could you sell that gravel? Sure.
It can be sold, but we can't sell something. I can hear that. It's not as easy for us to sell stuff as a town. But there was some cost, there was some benefit figured into that for selling or having people take it. That was figured in. But the cost of permitting, there's a lot of cost involved in this. More than you can get. Gravel isn't worth very much. So
I think-
while it's done.
Don't quote me on this, you'd have to get someone from DEC to comment on this, but I think if you harvest gravel and you sell it, it's a different permitting approach. And it has to do with like mining.
If you like to want it.
Yeah, it's a different type of permit. And
What are you taking it out? You're taking it out in the truck. What are you gonna do with it? Bless you. What are you gonna do with it?
I couldn't
Where you gonna put it?
tell you exactly how that works with selling it. I'm just saying the permit process is different, from what I understand. Yes.
Why can't it be put on the sides of the bank, on each side?
Well, because in a big flood, the water's up there. So if you leave it in the floodplain, it's taking up room.
Well, that's what's
Whether
gonna
it's in
happen
the-
with your project.
Hmm?
Eventually, if you don't dredge, no matter what you do, the same thing is gonna happen again. It's like a pipe. If you don't clean it out, you put a bigger pipe in, the same thing will happen again. Right?
Well, the difference between a river and a pipe is that a pipe is hard. The channel is alluvial. It flows across sediment that has deposited over eons. And
The pipe
there's
goes out
always,
wherever the weakest place.
well, sediment will continue to move down the channel.
Of course.
It'll continue to fill up the channel.
Right.
If you excavate it out of the bottom, you're creating a little bit more space, during a large flood where water is filling the entire.
If they would have cleaned it out every couple of years,
Yeah.
that wouldn't happen this way. And as for the house on Phoenicia, on Station Road, the second house to the side, they didn't have no flood in there. Only they got water in the basement, but no water in the house. And it's right off the bank.
Well, we hear that, that comment about we need to clean out the channel was expressed frequently during our meetings, which is why we really investigated it carefully. We modeled deepening of the channel. We looked at the costs of the repeated dredging. The channel is what it is right now. We looked at minor dredging, we looked at major dredging, and we exhausted those possibilities quite thoroughly. And it does show some flood reduction benefit.
Well, it's the same, if you take a pipe, small pipe out, put a bigger pipe in, if you don't keep it clean, it's same thing is gonna happen again.
Problem is, who's gonna pay to keep it clean?
Oh,
Nobody's gonna fund us.
What are you gonna do? What's gonna happen?
Yeah, again, it's back to the, so we're back to what Tom had brought up earlier about, if we can prove that the dredging and structures that we put into the stream and the Stony Clover are successful, then that's an argument we can use in future to say, this has been successful, it's working well, let's try it in other places. But until that's proven, we really can't move forward. Secondly, the DEC is not, they're not in favor of dredging at all. Again, like I said, when we went to do that project originally, they were not all sold on it until basically the commissioner came in and we had the engineers sitting there, Milone and MacBroome, arguing right there on the spot, saying, we think this might be successful, at least for the interim, we can look at it and use this as a study phase statewide. Secondly, the DEC, again, it comes down to funding sources. We're not gonna get funding from DEC or from CWC or anybody else. Nobody's giving us money to do a repetitive action within the stream bed. Again, the DEC will come and talk about degradation of the fishery, the natural habitat, and so on and so forth, and you kind of want to minimize that to the best of your ability. So if you can do something that has a longer term approach, that has more benefit to more people, then obviously we can do that. The floodplain benching is something we can do almost without having a DEC permit because you're not disturbing the stream bed. It's on the sides of the banks. It's a dry land work. So these are things that we can do to help reduce the flooding, reduce the flood insurance rates, and so on and so forth.
Now,
They dredged here for years, and it didn't interfere with.
And now everybody's
fishing
got
or
a camera
anything
on
like
their
that.
phone, and everybody, believe me, we get phone calls about people taking their excavators across the street constantly to make sure that they've got a permit or they've checked out with the DEC. It's instantaneous now, Ernie. Everybody calls up on everybody else, they're videotaping, they're watching it, they're reporting it, and
Fishing
it's
was
just world
great
record.
before the DEC was even in existence.
And the other
We
thing is,
did
everybody
dredging
always-
then, we said plenty of fish.
They're here to stay.
the other thing is, everybody always said
They were
they
here
dredged,
and the DEC wasn't. Maybe we should get rid of the DEC.
everybody always said they dredged the 214 stream up all the way up to the school, they used to say. When we cleaned out the channel, we got up to the firehouse and we were hitting clay, right under the gravel. So that was never, ever dredged. Clay wouldn't have been there.
one thing I didn't really get into when I talked about the floodplain enhancement scenario, I went through it a little bit quickly, but there's a bit more to it than just excavating the floodplain. The channel, we call it the active channel, the part that conveys flow all the time. It's wet all the time. That, if you size that properly relative to the floodplain, it conveys sediment much better than if it's too wide. So I simplified it a bit when I showed that cross section with the excavation of the floodplain and the different water surface elevations. There's a bit more to it than just excavating down the floodplain. This thing is engineered so that during normal flows, you have water coming through the channel. And to the extent possible, it's self-maintaining. You avoid sharp transitions into a wider channel where you're going to have sediment being deposited or abrupt changes in profile where it goes from a steep channel to a less steep channel and sediment gets dumped. You want to avoid that. You have a an active channel that will convey sediment, and then when the flows get to a certain discharge, they're on the floodplain, this enhanced floodplain. So you don't have these huge volumes of sediment being dumped. I mean, it not only does it improve channel capacity going downstream, but it improves sediment transport. And maybe I oversimplified the design that would go into that sort of floodplain enhancement scenario.
But doesn't that get negated by the constriction bridge?
The Bridge Street Bridge,
Or any of the bridges? If they're all constriction, they're all undersized.
they're not all undersized. The Route 28 bridge in Phoenicia is plenty big. The Bridge Street Bridge is undersized.
Yes.
And that would have to be replaced, and it would have to span the whole floodplain.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. You couldn't do the floodplain enhancement and leave that old bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. And,
But the 28 bridge in Mount Tremper is also
yeah, yeah.
undersized.
I mean, Mount Tremper, you could replace the bridge, you'd have some benefit. You could enhance the floodplain, you'd have some benefit. But they're both limited by each other. And if you did both, that would be ideal, but that's a very expensive project.
Well, again, it's our hope that, we have 2 bridges due to be replaced coming up this summer here on 42 and 28 in Shandaken. And when we talk to DOT, that bridge, they are aware of that bridge down in Mount Tremper, and that may be up for the next round when they come around to it again to be replaced with a 100-year flood structure.
Right, and that's,
And that would reduce our cost, which would increase the cost benefit
sure,
for floodplain
yeah.
enhancement with the.
It's similar to the approach we took on Bridge Street, where let's just say, through some other means, this bridge got replaced, then it's much easier to go forward with the project and to get it funded. And, we had similar dialogue in Prattsville, where there was a channel, recommendations for enlarging the channel and the floodplain. At the same time, the DOT was replacing a bridge, and there was back and forth. Can we make the bridge a bit bigger than we had originally envisioned to span not only the existing channel, but also this new wider floodplain that we're recommending? And, through dialogue over time, an agreement was reached, and a bigger bridge is being put in there. It didn't all happen at once.
What I was going to ask related more to funding, so I don't know if this is the section of what you're talking about.
I didn't go into it here, but the report has sort of recommendations of funding sources and, whether it's...
So I'll boil down to some question then.
Okay.
I mean, I imagine there are funding sources that are designed to help communities dealing with flood mitigation, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I may be off base, but if the Route 28 scenic byway goes through, it opens up funding streams for cultural, environmental, and historical, and recreational things along a scenic byway, which we would have one that goes right through Phoenicia. And it occurred to me that it may be possible to meld the floodplain proposal with creating a park that would be, historical and recreational, environmental. That might be able to tap into a funding stream like that, like the scenic byway funding stream.
Yeah, right. The recommendations we have in our report are strictly from flood relief sources or, property relocation sources, but that's a very feasible funding source if the town were to enact this sort of thing. I mean, I don't know anything about that funding source, but that sort of combination of flood reduction and sort of enhancement of recreation activities or that sort of thing. Because the floodplain enhancement project could be used for those purposes.
Just to go further, Tom, so the scenic byway is adopted. It is official. The governor signed it. It's all done.
Okay.
It's a scenic byway. So the scenic byway funds probably, most of it is tourism dollars, marketing dollars for attraction to the area. What the scenic byway does do for us is it gives us strength in applying for other funding sources, saying that this is adjacent to a scenic byway. And yes, it may open up more doors for us for recreational funding to say that we would like to create a linear park adjacent to our scenic byway in the hamlet of Phoenicia, an economic hub for the town of Shandaken, blah, 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 put the plate on deep. But really, the reason we go through this, or we're going through this LFA, and we're probably going to go through another LFA for the hamlet of Shandaken next, coming up shortly, is because it's a requirement through the CWC to open up a funding source through them. for flood, for flood initiatives and so on and so forth. Again, we also have the New York Rising funds, which Eric and I just met with representatives on Friday, because we originally had slated 5 bridges in the hollows to be moved forward through New York Rising project. Conveniently, FEMA, 4 years after Irene, has decided they're gonna fund 4 of those. So 4 of those have come off the numbers, away, saving us, what was it, 2.5 million or something? Out of the 3 million that we had for the bridges, and now saved where we can look towards other projects. And again, one of the projects was the creation of a recreational trail alongside of, along with the Bridge Street Bridge and so on and so forth, trying to interconnect the hamlets and so on with a rail and trail combination. So, again, it's really finishing this up to know where our funding sources are gonna come from next, and probably should be moving on it fairly quickly, because you wanna hit it while the iron's hot. And a lot of these grant applications, I'm finding, they have to have these reports within 2 years of your application. So if you sit on it too long, the funding's going to dry up, and you're forced to go back and redo another study and another study and another. And I know Rick loves studies, so we can do them all day long.
I gotta ask you one more thing. You went down in the canoe.
Yeah.
How many times you had to take the canoe out and you couldn't get through?
Yeah, we dragged bottom a few times.
Yeah,
that's for
see?
sure. Yeah.
Now, especially down there by Sleepy Hollow and Bugsy.
Oh, yeah.
It's not even a foot deep. in
Yeah.
there. Now, what does that tell you?
There's a lot of aggradation in the channel. Yeah,
I
that's
hope
for sure.
you, bring that up. Also, across from Uncle Pete's, that whole big island now that's there.
Yeah.
Now, that island, when I was a kid, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And now there's trees growing there that are 30, 40 feet or more.
Yeah.
That all has to, if you took that out of there, wouldn't that give it better down below in Mount Tremper for more volume of water?
It would improve the situation right there. It would improve the situation downstream.
Well, when you
And that's what,
when you have a flood, doesn't that volume of water, it's gonna hold back?
It actually, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually might worsen the situation down in Mount Tremper, because you'd have more velocity coming through there, sending the water quicker down to Mount Tremper, where it would just expand and
I
sit.
don't know. Maybe Beecher could answer that. He's done a lot of that work. Right there.
I mean, those are the exact gravel bars. I mean, as we canoed down, we noted where they all were, and you can see them in aerial photographs.
Yeah.
And some of them have, they're islands, they have trees growing on
I
them.
know.
Those are the exact areas that we modeled removing them. And as you saw, in some cases, yes, there's a benefit.
Yeah.
It's just when the benefit tends to be very localized, right up alongside the bar. If you had a house right next to the bar, you'd probably have a benefit if we took that bar out. But when you compare it, if you look at the overall flood reduction from pulling those bars out, there's some. But when you compare it to the cost, and I think we did a fair cost analysis of what it takes, and it includes permitting and all that, it's not an overall positive benefit to cost ratio. There is a benefit. There is some reduction in flooding. In some cases, in other cases there's not. If your house is just upstream or downstream from one of those bars, there isn't a benefit. It tends to be immediate, adjacent. Because it's not, on a channel like this, people talk about floodplain storage and water being stored in the floodplain. But in a channel like this, there's not a whole lot of floodplain